Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's turn to some of the political ramifications in what is sure to be an embarrassing period here for the President of the United States. Now, let's start with a clip of the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries responding recently on Meet the Press to a question about why President Biden at one point said that his son had done, quote, nothing wrong.
President Biden commented as a loving father, as I would hope any loving father would do. Hunter Biden, of course, is entitled, as was Donald Trump, to the presumption of innocence and to a trial by a jury of his peers. And this Justice Department is going to proceed in that fashion, present the facts and the law, and then we'll all have to wait for a determination that is made by a jury as to Hunter Biden's guilt or innocence.
Bill, what do you make of this and the back foot that this puts the president on, particularly as we get into the presidential election and these debates that are coming up with Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to cut Joe Biden a little slack on that statement. I think he was just defending his son and so forth. I think what he said is not true, but understandable for a parent to say that. I think they've kind of learned the lesson because his statement on trial was, as president, I'm not going to comment on ongoing federal cases. I just love my son. He's part of the family and so forth. The problem he has is just one, everyone's going to see a huge double standard in applying laws to the Bidens and everyone else. Hunter led a pretty privileged and degenerate life, and now he wants to get off this. And again, whatever the fairness is, he carries that presidential pardon in his back pocket. No other defendant in America enters court with more or less a guarantee he won't do jail time, even if he's found guilty. Last week, after Trump was convicted, Joe Biden came out and tweeted, no one is above the law. So I think it must have stung this week when the prosecution in Delaware opened their statement by saying the same words, no one is above the law, in reference to Hunter Biden. We'll see if that's still true.
Renee, do you agree with Bill that President Biden is likely to pardon his son Hunter if convicted? And keep in mind that if President Biden loses re-election in November, then he has a lame duck period where he could issue a pardon and would be publicly criticized for it, but he's on his way out the door. And if he wins re-election, that's the last term he can serve. So in some sense, there would be no political accountability after that either.
Yes, I think that it's almost certain that President Biden's going to pardon his son if Hunter does get convicted. Bill actually pointed out earlier that all the signs seem to be headed towards Hunter striking a deal in this prosecution to avoid having all of those witnesses like his ex-girlfriend, his ex-wife come in to testify and reveal all these lurid details. I actually think the pardon is probably the reason why that deal wasn't struck, in the sense that Joe Biden's going to look a little bit bad if he comes out and pardons his son, who everybody knows was guilty based on the evidence. I think he would look even worse if Hunter were to agree to a deal and avoid having to actually go through a trial process, and then President Biden also were to remove the sentence that he would have accepted in return for taking that deal. And so I think that that's one very clear indication that we can look to, rather than just speculation about President Biden readying himself to issue that pardon in the case of Hunter's conviction. I do think that people who already have a reason to dislike President Biden are going to make a lot of hay out of it and say that there's a huge double standard here. I'm not sure that the median American voter or the moderate voter who's still making up his mind about the election is going to be very influenced by that possibility. Insofar as Hakeem Jeffries pointed out, I think people understand that that's what anyone would do with regard to their own child if they had the ability. But I do think that it does make President Biden look bad, and like so many parts of the case that Democrats have built against Donald Trump, you can very easily point to examples of them doing the exact same sorts of things in a way that just diminishes their idea that Trump is uniquely lawless and should be kept out of office for that reason.
Bill, we'll give you the last word. We'll have to keep an eye on how the gun trial goes, and then the Hunter Biden tax case is coming later this year. But another thing to keep in mind on this argument about selective prosecution is that these are federal cases. These are federal cases being prosecuted by the Justice Department that is run ultimately by President Biden. And am I wrong to think that part of what's going on here is something of a cover for that plea deal, that soft plea deal that the special counsel tried to cut with Hunter Biden, but then which fell apart on contact with a federal judge? And now we are ending up with this case that is being prosecuted again by a special counsel appointed by President Biden's own attorney general as a way to kind of show that the administration is taking this seriously after all.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Kyle. Look, there's a reason it's taken 6 years to get to court from when he committed the crime. If you look at the evidence, it's pretty clear cut, right? That what the evidence they have is a simple case. It's not like Trump's case with a convoluted legal theory behind it. It's very clear cut. Did he buy the gun, lie on the form, and possess a gun illegally? And the answer looks overwhelmingly to be yes, supported by lots of evidence. And the only reason it's delayed is because David Weiss tried to cut a real sweetheart deal with Hunter that would spare him jail time, grant him a broad immunity for all of his business dealings. And he couldn't defend that in the open. When the judge asked some basic questions, he just couldn't defend it. It was indefensible. And so he was backed into the charges. These are kind of accidental. He's backed in. I suspect Hunter's stubbornness had a role in this. He wouldn't accept anything less than sweetheart deal. So now the result is a trial that's not only interesting for the actual trial and whether they find Hunter guilty of criminal acts. There's going to be all sorts of things embarrassing to the president and his family and Hunter, presumably, that come out of it. I was still suspecting that there might be a plea right before the trial because I think that would be the smartest thing to do. One last thing. It's a possible opening for Democrats. If Joe Biden would say, I'm going to spare the country, I'm going to pardon my son, and I'm resigning, the Democrats would have a chance to put someone up. Now, they have to deal with the Kamala problem, but at least the Joe problem would be done, and they could move ahead. I don't think any of that is likely, but it is a possibility.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Monet. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.